Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you so much for coming. My name is Steve Shaw. I'm the Senior Vice President of Product for Automation Anywhere, and genuinely appreciate everyone coming here today, especially those of you who could not find a seat. The fact that you would stand this long for us, is humbling. So, but we will try and make it interesting and entertaining, and hopefully somewhat interactive. We have time carved out specifically for being able to handle questions. I have with me two folks here. So Micah Smith, who many of you know from our YouTube series. Micah, if you want.
Yeah, my name is Micah Smith. I lead our developer evangelism efforts, bot games, Pathfinder, some other stuff. Oh, Pathfinder Academy too. That's a new thing.
So everything that you've been grumpy about in terms of process, it's his fault. And we also have Mark with us. Mark?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Goodaire. I lead our internal automation program at Automation Anywhere. Totally honored to be here and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. So the good news is normally I'm supposed to, read the Riot Act about making sure that I go through safe harbor. Rule of thumb for me is that I like telling everyone up front when I'm talking roadmap and when I'm not. All the slides that we have here today are GA. So there are things that exist. You can start using them right now. So if you are uncertain, that's the default go-to. If we see something that contradicts that, we will be sure to call that out. So let's jump right into things. So to set a little bit of context for everybody, what we've observed is that when we go and we roll out programs and we see all of you roll out programs, it's been a tremendous amount of exciting stuff, but putting together a program and managing a program is hard. Arguably, probably the hardest thing about making automation work in general. And the reason why it's hard is because especially as people coming from IT backgrounds, myself included, I spent the 90s as a sysadmin. For the record, they took away my root password in 2000. They also took away my check-in bit, so there was probably a sign there. So, we're really good at technology. We know how to build stuff. We know how to make all this stuff run, and all of you have been absolutely tremendous at this. You've given us great product feedback, and I love seeing it. We've given us great suggestions for product improvements. Also love seeing that. But now, how do we go and operationalize that? That's something that we don't get to learn as, especially coming from an IT background. So being able to operationalize that well is a skill that takes time, and we've seen a lot of sessions today, and I think there's one tomorrow, that actually talks about that. I believe the previous one was specifically on that journey. What we wanted to talk about today was the tools that you can use to help you through that process. There are three tools in particular that we're going to be talking about. The first tool is Pathfinder. That is, what do we need to do in order to go and put together a program, and what are the kits that we have available for us. The second tool we have is CoE Manager. Many of you have seen this, you've heard about it. If you have not gotten a demo for that, that is in one of the demo pods, and I encourage all of you to go and check it out. CoE Manager, every person who has looked at it has said, my goodness, this means the end of an Excel spreadsheet. And they've been so happy. In all of my career as a product leader, I have never had a product that has made this many people happy. So I'm very encouraged by that. And the last tool is actually your partners. How do you engage your partners, and what partners are out there that you can connect with that have these skills and can help your teams put it together in real life? So why do you need to put all of this stuff together? Well, this morning that you saw in the keynote, hopefully you all spent the entire time through the keynote. Yes? Yes. It was, for as hard as we worked on those demos, you better have sat through that. So what we heard about was this new system of work. We talked a lot about generative AI and where it fit into the picture. We've talked about trust and where the cloud fits into the picture. The reason why operationalizing this stuff is challenging is that if you think about, instead of products and technologies, what is the flow of work that we do, right? We get ideas, The ideas come from all over the place. We have some of the ideas of our own, the line of business will share a couple of ideas, and then we start seeing them come in from all over the place. And so we discover all kinds of new stuff that comes along through that process. Some of you may have process discovery. You're using that to identify new opportunities as well. Really interesting ways of figuring out that list. But then you build this backlog. And then that hard question, what do I do next? Well, the thing that you end up doing next is figuring out which automation that you're going to build, and you build it. And there's a bunch of great tools for being able to build those automations. We have, of course, RPA, which we've all know and love, but we also have APIs, which we've been talking about, process orchestration, we have IDP. These are all really powerful tools. And from there, we go and figure out how to scale it. Today, we're going to really focus on that scale piece. How do you go and put together that program so that you can actually scale, not from a technology perspective, but really scale from a people perspective? The good news is that you're not alone. There's a lot of people who are struggling with this. So being able to do this successfully is its own art, and I encourage all of you to spend that time to treat it with that level of discipline that you treat the product expertise with. If you do that, I believe that everybody here can be successful. So with that, I want to jump into Pathfinder. And to do that, the person who actually created Pathfinder, Micah, is going to take over at this point. So Micah, the floor is yours.
No, this is great. Thank you. And I do want to clarify a couple things here. Pathfinder is not a product so much as it is a program, right? And it's a program designed to enable automation leaders to grow and scale their automation practices. And so as much as you hear Pathfinder being thrown around, yes, it's the name of our community, but it's also the name of this program. And Steve attributed the program to myself, but the reality was we were asked by leadership, what do we do and what do we tell and how do we explain to Automation Anywhere customers how to scale their program? Many will get through a couple bots or a couple automations that they've created, and then how do they take that to the next level? And so I previously led an automation program at TIAA. I led that for several years. I know what it's like to go through this. I have the scars on my back of the things that I got wrong and the things that we did really well. But I also created this in conjunction with Mark Goodaire. And Mark runs our automation CoE internally. And so this was the two of us coming up with how do we create the ideal, perfect automation program that's operating on all cylinders and at scale. And we came up with this idea of the 5 Ps of automation maturity. And they all start with P, but they're really the pillars, right? First is program. This is all about my program operations, the metrics that I'm tracking when I talk about my program. The next is people. How do I think about the people and roles that enable my program, enable the scale, enable creating all of these automations that I'm trying to create? The next is pipeline. Pipeline management is a huge deal for a lot of organizations. And how I manage my pipeline, how I'm getting in ideas, how I'm able to optimize those ideas, how I'm able to determine which is the next best opportunity for me to take on, those are all really important components of pipeline. Production is another one. Production is really a P word for the way that I design, develop, and deliver my automations. I had to have a P word so it would fit my memorable 5 Ps, but this is all about the best practices in doing development and delivery. How am I doing my design? Thinking about our solution patterns. Am I using automation frameworks or templates? Do I have that consistency? Am I doing the error handling, the logging, the log management, the screenshots, all of that the same way every single time? And then the last P is around promotion and engagement. And this is the one that I think feels the most uncomfortable for a lot of people coming from IT backgrounds, right? I have to not only lead this automation program, but I have to be able to tell people about it and get them excited about it and tell them about why this matters and why our organization needs to invest in this and needs to grow our program. So these are the 5 pillars that represent automation program maturity. Now, for each of these pillars, we have a start phase, accelerate, and scale phase. So if I'm just getting started with promotion and engagement, or if I'm at the accelerate phase of production or scale, we have guidance for organizations that are at these different levels. So you might do a self-evaluation and say, well, we're doing really well with program, but we really don't have a competency framework in place for people. And so we don't know the people on our team, where they have gaps, where they have strengths, where they can grow, where we have gaps that we need to fill as a team. So those are the different areas of our 5 Ps. Now for Pathfinder, those 5 pillars are expressed through some of these missions. And these missions are kind of the marketable, the tangible ways for us to be able to talk about the different journeys that a lot of our customers are going on. And so myself and Kristen Engelhardt went all around the world delivering these different missions to all of our customers. And we were originally setting off to give them guidance on how to best grow and scale their automation program. And that went really well. But we also were able to get a lot of feedback from customers to say, hey, these are areas where we're doing really well, or these are areas where we're actually struggling. And so we accidentally did the largest study on automation programs that's ever been done. And we've been able to use a lot of that detail to come back and re-improve and reinvigorate a lot of the content that we've created. So we have these 7 missions. These are available on our Pathfinder website. If you go to pathfinder.automationanywhere.com, you'll find some links to this kind of stuff. We have these missions available online. So I'd encourage you to check those out. But as a part of that kind of global research study that we did, we were able to come up with kind of a standard or a maturity benchmark for where our customers are at across these 5 pillars. So what we did is we said, all right, for program readiness, for people, for pipeline, for production, we're going to come up with what is the definition of being at the start phase, what is the definition of being at the accelerate phase, what's the definition of being at the scale phase. And we're going to read that criteria to each of these customers, and we're going to enable them to self-assess where they're at. It's a moment in time measurement of how they're doing in these different key areas. And these are the averages that we saw, right? And what we're seeing is that people and roles is an area where most people feel like they're struggling. They don't have a good definition of what the roles are for their automation program, where people can grow, how they have a competency framework. We also see that promotion and engagement is an area that a lot of organizations struggle with. What this tells us is that there are relationships between these different pillars. So for example, promotion and engagement is low. If promotion and engagement is really low for you as a customer, it probably means you're also struggling with your pipeline. Because unless people know about my program, unless my stakeholders are really dialed in on what we're capable of, what we can do, then they're probably not going to know to submit ideas to my automation pipeline. There's also relationships between all of these, right? If my program isn't capturing the kind of metrics that matter to my leadership and to our organization, then I'm likely not going to be really good at promotion and engagement no matter how hard I try. If I go to an executive and I say, hey, you know what? We just created 15 bots this quarter. They're going to say, we really don't care because we don't know what that means, right? 15 bots could save me $10 million or $15. So it really depends on me being able to speak the language of what my leadership and what my organization care about. So this was a great study. We're going to give you a link so that you're able to take this same assessment for your own automation program, and you can see how you rank up. I would encourage you to take a picture of this, though, in case you want to see where you rank. Now, we created this program, right? We also did an assessment on our own internal CoE, right? We didn't just come here and say, we're going to give ourselves all 5s. And in fact, no customer that we've gone over has...
I'm not all 5.
I changed the slides. You're not all 5s.
Okay.
No customer that we have ever worked with has had all 5s in all areas, right? They recognize that there's areas where they need to improve, and we can give them specific guidance on how to mature in those different areas. So, Mark, I want you to have a moment of vulnerability here.
Oh boy.
And I want you to talk through some of these scores, why you say you're at these different areas, and talk through us a little bit.
Sure. Awesome. So yes, not all 5s. I think the first thing I'd say is like we have a pretty high standard for an automation program. There's a lot of wild ideas I get. I was flying on my way to Austin, getting more wild ideas and sending messages to the team. But I think this is a pretty good reflection of where we're at. And I think part of the message here is we haven't arrived. So we've made lots of progress, but there's also more that we can do. I think if I was to highlight a couple areas that I want to pick on, let's start maybe with promotion and engagement. I think we, like many of you, this is something that maybe we've made some progress in, but we need to do a little bit more. I think on promotion and engagement, we're always trying to think about how do you get people's attention and really make sure that they understand the value that we're delivering. So what are the kind of things that we do internally? We've got communications going to our senior executives. Hey, look, what the team has done recently. Look at some of the cool use cases. This is what we're doing with generative AI and Copilot. So there's communications going to executives. We've got newsletters. So every quarter, people like Steve or Micah would receive a newsletter. Here's the latest and greatest of what we're doing and what's coming soon. So all those basic communications, we've got a company-wide site where we publish all those metrics and things like that. Believe it or not, it's not always enough. even within Automation Anywhere, we've got a bunch of busy employees, busy executives, so just getting people's attention. So suffice it to say that I think there's probably more we can do here. I'd like to see, for example, even better advocacy within the business units. The difference between me, I report through to our CIO, Sumit. I'm in IT. The difference between me singing the praises of automation in the marketing area versus the marketing person, I can tell you it resonates completely differently. So we want to see from a promotion and engagement standpoint, we want to see the heroes that are being made within the organization. We want to see those people celebrated, and I think that's going to elevate the whole program. So that's kind of picking on our promotion and engagement piece. I think if I think about people, Micah knows I've got a lot of passion around this topic, things like competency frameworks, understanding not only the capabilities we have as a team. When I say capabilities, I'm talking about if we were to look across all the solution patterns, if we looked at the different parts of our product, where are we rocking versus no, we're a little weak there. So for example, you might not be surprised to hear that we've got a lot of demand for generative AI use cases. That'd be a pretty important capability for me to have very, very strongly, not 1 out of 20 people have that skill. I want to build that up. Yeah. So I think there's more we can do around measuring that and also putting actions in place to make sure that we've got the right competencies in place.
Talk real quick about the relationship between people and promotion and engagement. You said you want to have more automation champions internally advocating for your program. What do we call that in the people pillar, and how does that relate?
Right. So we have one concept that we have. When we talk about kind of the different hats that people wear, I think it's important in the automation program that the message that pretty much everyone has a place. So if you're familiar with the C's that we put in the Pathfinder program, one of them is contributing ideas. So if somebody does nothing else other than contributing a good idea, awesome. We've got creators, the people that are actually delivering the automations. We've got champions. So somebody that's championing, or that's kind of what I was just talking about, being an advocate for the program, being an advocate for automating more of their own process area. That's also awesome. So recognizing each of these different roles that different people can play, and then celebrating it.
Yeah. Right. And then the last of the 4 C's, if you're taking notes, is
which one did I miss?
The consumer. So
consumers. So the people that are actually getting the benefit from the automation. Sorry, the people that are actually getting the benefit. Those are consumers.
Right. Yeah, that was excellent. Thank you for going over that.
So, Mark, I've got one last question for you, and that is, you gave yourself 4 on production, and that implies that the automations that you're building are working extremely well and high impact. Tell us real quick, in terms of building up that skill set within the organization, right? Because when we bring on teams, IT members from outside of the company, they don't always come with that skill. What were the kinds of investments that you put into place in order to make that work?
Absolutely. So we needed to get a strong citizen developer program up and running at the right stage of our journey. That was super, super critical. So not surprisingly, probably, Steve, the demand for new automation was more than my team could fulfill, as a CoE leader. So making sure that we've got citizen developers was super important. So I think that was all about, first of all, trying to identify who's going to be a good fit for a citizen developer. I don't know if this is controversial or not. Not everyone may be a good fit to be a citizen developer. But we're looking for people that are probably process-oriented, the kind of people in your finance department that do things with Excel that you never thought could be done, those kind of people that are logic and process-oriented. So picking off those people. And then, of course, there's training. Thanks to things like the Pathfinder Academy, we can make sure that they go through the right training. Shout out to what's happening with the Pathfinder Academy as well. Some of the new courses, I'll give one example, if I can do this, some promotion of Pathfinder Academy. It's going to help teach people what that actually looks like to think in that kind of logical, process-oriented way. That's not always obvious, right? So one of the first things we need to be able to do if we're going to build an automation is be able to think, what are we starting with? What are the steps we're going to go through? And we're going to end up with an output. So how do you train people just to think that way? And then obviously layer on the product knowledge, and then they'll actually be able to put it to work.
Yeah.
Okay, we're on time for this.
Awesome.
All right, so I already warned them yesterday that I'm going to cut them off because this is, we have a lot to say and not enough time to do it. Mm-hmm. I want to go to the next item, which is CoE Manager, and I can take over from here.
There you go.
Thank you. So, show of hands, how many people here have looked at CoE Manager already? That's a pretty solid, that's awesome. Okay, so CoE Manager in a nutshell addresses one of the pieces that came out of the Pathfinder conversation, and that is, how do we go through this whole journey from a tools and technology perspective, and then have the right pieces in place to be able to track what's happening. So you start with, say, process discovery, you figure out what your resulting opportunities are, and then you go into pipeline and delivery. Pipeline and delivery is where CoE Manager is. Now you'll notice we have not begun talking about actually building anything yet. Building comes later. So what you're actually getting here is an opportunity to assess what the ideas are, be able to figure out how they fit into your pipeline, prioritize your pipeline based on metrics that matter to you and your business. So the traditional metrics here would be, what is the complexity of the automation, right? How long is this going to take me? Versus what is that return? So we can build a bubble chart for you that'll actually graph that, and immediately you get a visualization that says, that big bubble in the top right, that's my #1 priority. So the question of what's next goes away. This is not something where you can argue a point and the squeaky wheel gets the automation. You actually get a mechanism to go and do a prioritization based on math. From there, you actually go through the build process that we talked about earlier. Then it comes actually back to CoE Manager. And this is what I really love about this. Earlier, the comment was made, how do I go and show my leadership what the value of 15 bots are? Is it 15 million or $15? With value realization, we have the tools for actually tracking what that return on investment looks like. So you can say, how many processes did I go and run? How many customer records did I process? Each one of these actions has a dollar amount associated to it. So now you can come back and say, my automations collectively were valued at this much. And you could actually put a concrete dollar amount, and you can dashboard the whole thing so you can see visually where you stand with the program versus what you may have promised at the beginning of the year. So this is an absolute win. Every time we show this to CIOs, we show it to CFOs. I actually got to show it to a CFO this morning. Lit up. They go, that's the dashboard I want. Because now I can justify going and putting more money into an automation program. So this last piece of value realization, big, big deal. So what goes into CoE Manager in terms of tools and technology? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's the ability to go and collect ideas. Ideas don't just come from our internal teams. They also come from general users. So right now, Mark goes and he runs his program. I'm a user in his universe, right? I'm a user that's a pain in the side, but I'm a user. So he wants to go, and instead of having me email him ideas, he wants to give me a link to say, go submit your ideas here. And that way, especially if you're in a larger organization, everyone has access to be able to submit their ideas. You want to be able to go and do those value-focused decisions that we talked about earlier. How do I go and turn this into a chart so I immediately know what's next? How do I go and figure out where I'm pulling this data from? This has got to come from somewhere. Well, it comes from control room. If it's coming from control room, how many control rooms do I have access to? I'll get more into that a little bit later. Being able to go and review the return on investment, and then being able to do some customizations based on that reporting. So how do I know what features I have available to me? We've got a base version of the product, and this is the end of the sales pitch, by the way. So there's a base version of the product that does the pipeline management and the integration with up to 3 control rooms. And then there's a plus version of the product that does all of the stuff that we talked about. And we're also in the process of adding integrations with third parties. So supporting UiPath, supporting Blue Prism, supporting Microsoft, and being able to pull data from those. Because as much as it hurts me, and it does hurt me, some of you have told me that you use another product as well. So this is something that now I can at least give you the tool for being able to track that return on investment, because I'd rather see your collective automation program succeed than to have to go and fight on a per product basis. That doesn't help you, it doesn't help any of us on the vendor landscape. So
one comment real quick on that, if we can. Tying this back to Pathfinder, if we were to look at the capabilities of CoE Manager that immediately helps you to basically move into the accelerate or scale phase on the way that you're doing pipeline. It helps you to move into the, I would say, accelerate phase in your program. It also can really help to inform the way that you do promotion and engagement, because not only do I have data on the value of the automations I've already delivered, but I also have some forecasting data. And that enables me to have those conversations with leadership to say, look, this is what we've done so far, this is what we'll do in the next 6 months, and this is our confidence on that, right? And so not only am I just talking about what I've delivered, the return on that investment, but also looking forward where I plan to go. And that makes for a much more compelling story for your conversations with leadership on executive buy-in.
So Mark, you're customer zero for me. So when we put out new releases, you're seeing them first.
Yes.
You've rolled out CoE Manager. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it's been huge. Just this, I don't think you can understate the importance just of visibility and transparency in terms of what's going on. The way we've started to use this internally is CoE Manager screens get opened for almost all of our discussions, and in two ways. And this is kind of nice. We have kind of a federated model, so we have a bit of healthy competition between different business areas, and so CoE Manager can really easily give you like a wall of fame or a wall of shame. Hey, marketing person, wow, 2 automations last quarter. Let me just show you what finance is doing. Those kind of discussions. But just having the visibility, and as Steve said, these are metrics that are actually meaningful. You can actually have those conversations about, what are you trying to drive in terms of progress in your business unit? What kind of metrics are you trying to change? And you can actually look back later and say, these automations are actually having the intended impact. Or by the way, just as importantly, they're not. So we've had discussions in both directions. Sometimes we thought the automation was going to be used this much. Sometimes it's more than we expected. We have different discussions, or sometimes it's less. They're not consuming it as much. And what a fantastic foundation for that conversation. Otherwise, without that kind of visibility, everything's very kind of qualitative and anecdotal, but it gives you a platform for those discussions. So it's been a huge change for us.
And that analytic view has shown that the product team is number one in your user base?
Obviously. I don't think there's any question about that.
He's lying, by the way. Finance is currently number one, and I'm reminded of that in his weekly emails. So we already talked about the Pathfinder piece. I want to pause real quick because I'd love to be able to answer some questions, because we've talked about Pathfinder, we've talked about CoE Manager. Partners are kind of a little out there compared to the rest of the conversation. I'd love to hear your thoughts, what's working, what's not. Nobody. I don't believe it. I want to turn into a yes, miss.
Can we talk about how customizable it is? Because each of us work at different companies where we're going to have different ways of measuring alignment or complexity or some of the other key metrics associated with it. So how customizable is this? And is it down to that functional area, so finance versus marketing?
So Mark, you've done a lot of customization. Why don't you share what you've done and what's worked?
Yeah, I think, so to your point, the way that we've structured everything is by consumer, like of the C's, it's by consumer, and that's where we can always get the view across different dimensions where we can compare different business units. So we have discussions also, not just about automations that have been delivered or value, but hey, marketing, why aren't you submitting more ideas? So we can look at the contribution bit. We can compare ideas that are coming in, the value of the ideas or quality of the ideas, and then obviously value later on. We found that the visualization layer has been pretty easy to customize. So in terms of being able to get the kind of charts and graphs, the dream of mine was that bubble chart that I think Steve mentioned earlier. That to me is one of the most valuable things, right? So you end the kind of subjective discussion about which automation are we going to do next? What should we deliver next? So we found that visualization layer to be pretty easy to customize, configure.
The platform that we built the product on is from a company called Shibumi. In fact, one of the co-founders is here. So the Shibumi team did an absolutely stellar job of building a very flexible platform. The strength of Shibumi is that it is super flexible. The challenge for a CoE leader is that it comes out of the box with that flexibility. What CoE Manager aims to do is take that flexibility and we pre-shape it into what we've seen work the most consistently so that you don't have to be in a place where you're constantly having to do a lot of customizations. What we encourage teams to do is use our professional services team to do those customizations. We can help you manage that and track it over time, and that also means that we can help you carry those customizations forward as new versions come out. Note that the CoE Manager release timeline is different from our standard product release cycle. So .30 is about to come out. That doesn't necessarily mean Shibumi has a new release today. So did we answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions that we can answer for you? Yes, sir.
I'd like to know how struggling is to measure each column. For example, how can I...
I'll repeat the question.
Great, thank you. I'd like to know how struggling is to measure each column. For example, how can I know if the team engagement is 4 or 5 or 3 point?
This is a Pathfinder question. This is for me. This is my sweet spot. All right, so I'm going to show you real quick. I forgot to mention this on our slide itself. If you scan this QR code, this takes you to our Pathfinder mission control. And what you'll do is sign in there, and then you can actually take this full assessment. So for each of these 5 key areas, we break them down to 3 core competencies. And we have a definition for what it means to be at start, accelerate, or scale, or someplace in between on all of those competencies. So you're essentially answering 15 questions to get a score like this. And so all of that's broken down on there, and then we're actually providing custom guidance to you based on where you're at. So if I'm at the accelerate phase, we're going to tell you how I can get to scale, right? But really you want to look at where I'm the lowest, because you want to be, I think balanced is probably better than really strong in one area and horrible in another.
Okay. And then we are time boxed, so we
All right,
need to move on
let's
to
go.
the next topic.
You got a lot of clicking to do.
There. So partners. Partners are, and forgive me, this sounds like a cheesy open, but partners are super critical. And they're not just paying me to say that. So here's the thing. When we go out and we put together these programs, invariably what we find is that we do, especially early on, we're trying to build up that expertise ourselves. And so we do want to learn from somebody. The second thing that we learned is that there's inevitably more work to be done, especially as people start ideating and they start identifying new opportunities for automation. Using a partner means that you can, on day one, have a team that will be able to go and just out the gate immediately help you with producing value. And for those quick wins early on to show your leadership, this automation thing has a huge payoff, right? We can do way more with it than we could with other approaches or other pieces of technology. That's a big win. And partners are fantastic at being able to put together a program for you like this. They're also great at being able to help you operationalize your team. So if you've got a great number of just really smart technical teams, but you don't necessarily have a program manager as part of that, a partner can help provide that. So I really do encourage speaking with a partner, and all of the partners that we have, not just the ones that are listed here. These just happen to be the big global ones. But all of our partners have gotten Pathfinder training. And so they are familiar with that program. Many of them have gone and customized their program or added bits and pieces based on their own levels of expertise or market verticals they know really well. And they will be able to help you in that space. If there's a specific partner that you're looking for or somebody who has knowledge of your space, by all means, let us know. We will help you find that partner because we've got, at this point, hundreds of partners. We're into 1,000 plus. So we have a lot of partners who have a lot of collective expertise. We want to help you bring those two pieces together. So I'm going to ask Micah here because Micah, you said that you were doing this at scale at TIAA. And I imagine that you were also using partners, and I know that we have partners. Actually, I'm going to go with Mark first in the interest.
First, yeah.
So we use partners at Automation Anywhere. Like, what's the deal? I thought we knew this stuff.
We needed help with Pathfinder. No, we're not. Hopefully not help with Pathfinder. So within our internal automation program, I actually use multiple partners with different models as well. So back to Pathfinder. One thing Pathfinder talks about is this concept of I call it, we would call it like a delivery channel. Citizen development to me is a delivery channel. Another delivery channel is we've got these use cases that need to be built, and we would give them to a partner. So I've got one model where essentially we've gone to a partner and said we need some resource augmentation. We got too much demand. We need some additional help. Even the citizen developers can't keep up. We need some help from partners. Those staff members, if Steve or Micah were to interact with them, they wouldn't even know that they're not Automation Anywhere employees. They've just been blended into our Center of Excellence. And then the other one is kind of more outcome-based. I have both of those models running right now with different partners. That outcome-based one is more, we profile the use case, again, per exactly what Pathfinder talks about in terms of how we assess the ideas, and then decide which ones are going to go to a partner, and we need those medium complexity or high complexity, we need those delivered by this date, and they basically take them cradle to grave for those ones. They take them through the whole development life cycle. And so why are we doing that? Different partners, I think, have different competencies. They've got different expertise, no different than our own team. So different models, different partners to fulfill different needs. But that's what we're doing right now.
Awesome. No, and I think you share that very practical piece. There's more ideas and more work to be done than there's capacity to do it. Partners are a great way of being able to fill that in without necessarily having to go and expand team sizes, especially when you're still trying to justify and explain the value of something. So, questions on anything that we've talked about today? Because we're at the Q&A time, and I want to make sure that we get some questions in. I want to start picking on random people if you don't ask them questions. Yes, sir.
My question is about the CoE. My question is about the CoE Manager Plus. I was wondering what kind of data point can you extract and build, visualization on? Is it like just let's say the number of time the bot has been running, or can we have like a view of the number of transactions, I would say, that the bot has been processed, something like that?
So, okay, thank you. So I'm going to rephrase your question a little bit. The way that you've probably heard about counting the value of something, especially in the automation landscape, is how many times did it run? The thing is that, as many of you have come back and told us, because many of you are using Workload Manager as an example, the amount of processing it does per invocation varies. So one way of looking at it is to say, per execution, how much value did it generate? And we can count those automatically. Out of the box, you can associate an automation back to an idea. You can show what the link is between the two. We will count it up, and we will turn that into a dollar amount. Right? The second approach is there's an API that you can call back into the CoE Manager, and you can say, tick off a counter every time I do this thing, and that gets associated to the same idea. As a result, you're able to go and create custom ways of being able to track the value of something. So how many emails did we process? How many customer records did we process? We had one customer who spoke to us about the number of kilometers that their trucks were traveling, because that was the ultimate metric of return. If they reduced that count, they could get more efficient use. More efficient use was less CO2. That was real dollars to them. So there's any number of ways that you can count that, but it's a great tool for being able to track all of that information. Did we answer your question? Okay. Another question?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Yeah, as far as the CoE Manager, can you also see how long it takes to get to development and ultimately into production, as far as where the bottlenecks might be?
So how do we go and track? I'm going to try and rephrase your question a little bit. If you think about the whole life cycle of building an automation, right? There's some amount of time in the ideation, some amount of time that's lost to just approvals. You actually have the build time and then the deployment approvals time. How do we go and track that whole journey? CoE Manager will let you track the whole journey from start to finish because it's date and time stamping all of those inputs. So when an idea comes in to an approval of an idea, you can add notes to that to say, hey, today is September 19th. I am waiting for somebody to come back and approve the budget for doing this because we need to use a partner for it, right? All of that information can get tracked, and then you can come back and use that as a tool for being able to say start to finish between idea to the point that we put it into production. What was that journey looking like? And then all of the details that went into it are also available because you actually have detailed notes. If you can add documents to that, all of that information is available. I'm going to take this opportunity to give Shibumi a plug here too. So the cool thing about CoE Manager, because it's based on this underlying tool, is this underlying tool is great for program management at the whole enterprise scale. So if you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I go and track a big program, not just in the CoE, but how do I track a program across a broader use case, right? That is something that you can use Shibumi for. And we will help you put you in touch with the Shibumi team. They're actually a sponsor this today. So I think they're on the third floor. You're able to go and talk to one of those folks about what they can do with this outside of the context of CoE Manager. We encourage both to get used because one is specialized and are pre-configured for this use case. The other one's a more generalized use case. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I got a question. How do you get to the actual dollar amount? You mentioned the bubble chart, because there's. How do you get to the dollar amount with the bubble chart? And in another part too, I want to say is there's some opportunities that if you left them off the table, you would lose revenue.
Yeah.
So not just the time savings. So there's kind of both sides. So how do you determine those numbers?
So when an idea comes in, you have an opportunity to go and give it a value. And usually that's the person who's proposing the automation. I want to go and build an automation. So I ask Mark, I need an automation that's going to go and process a bunch of JIRA cards, right? And I think it's going to be worth this much money because this is how much time it'll save me, right? What Mark will turn around and do is, let's say he builds that automation based on those metrics I provide him. He builds it, now he goes and tracks it, and he finds out that I am an incredibly lazy bastard and I never go and I run the automation, right? Because that's never happened before, no. When that happens, then every time the bot does run, you get that tracker to say how many counts do I have, and you can actually compare the two values. So number of times it's run is one metric, as we were talking about earlier, and the other one is that API call back in to say how many records were processed. So if I said every JIRA card that it goes and processes for me, it saves me an hour's worth of time, an hour's worth of product manager time is worth this much, ergo, this is how much time it's going to save. So he codes it up to say, count how many JIRA cards got processed, multiply that by the dollar amount, that's what the total savings is. If I never ran that automation, then or if I run it very infrequently, then I might come back and say I saved $100. But my proposal was for saving $1 million. Now we can see that gap. What was the reality in its use versus what was the proposed savings? And this allows you to also come back to business leaders who said, we have to have this or our world ends. You now have metrics to be able to have a pretty interesting conversation with them about being able to take their ideas and correctly value them.
So are you able to value that other side where if you didn't do it, you would lose revenue?
So
you have manual work, or you have workers, but not enough to do the job, and so you're just leaving revenue off the table. Do you value that too?
Yeah, so the question for those of you who couldn't hear the whole thing was, what about money we lost if we didn't do the bot, right? It's a great question. So we can't count what we don't know. This is where the difference in the potential value versus the actual value might come in. So if, let's say, the actual value is a metric of the number of contact center agents that are invoking the automation as part of their daily routine. You're expecting that you're going to get 1 million calls this year. In reality, you got 500,000 calls. The other 500,000 went to some other approach. At that point, unless there was a metric driven around that other approach, we have no way of counting it. So we can't count what wasn't done unless there was, but you can count the gap between expectation versus what delivered.
And I just want to mention, and there is quite a bit of customization within CoE Manager in terms of what those metrics are. You can certainly add additional metrics, not just savings and cost avoidance and things like that. You can track whatever you want. You can customize those fields.
Yes, sir.
One quick question about the CoE Manager potential.
We'll repeat the question.
Potential new features. So it analyzes my process, calculates my savings rate. Does it also, now with generative AI, does it also calculate if my process sucks? Meaning, I'm receiving this PO, but I'm executing a lot of back and forth. Here are 10 suggestions of how your process should be. And if it's not there yet, it's a product idea when it's counted.
Ken, is that feature coming next week or is it the week after? I keep on forgetting. You promised me.
So to repeat the question, which great question, by the way, will CoE Manager give me an assessment of the quality of my automation? And it will also give me an assessment of the underlying business process. So the short answer is no, it doesn't do that. It is there to track the program and it is there to track the ROI. It does not do an assessment. Now, that said, this is where process discovery can be very helpful, right? So with process discovery, if you go and you capture the whole end-to-end process, one of the things it can do is evaluate what that underlying graph looks like and actually do graph optimization on that to say, you know, there's a shorter path here. If we took this instead of that, you would see huge savings in terms of the efficiency of doing this work. But that's completely different product. It's an awesome product, highly recommended. I may or may not be biased again, but the graph optimization is actually incredibly interesting. I did graph optimization work as part of my studies in the 90s, and when I saw it in real life and play out for us, that was very exciting to see. So it's cool stuff. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we talked about the very first block where we are doing the discovery, the last block where we are showing the performance. What about the middle block where we are building the bots actually? So is there something in the roadmap where we can integrate Jira or ServiceNow for the agile methodologies or just track the scrums, all those things? Because that will help the dev managers, right?
Right. So being able to go and track Jira as one of the to-do items on the program plan, we definitely want to be able to go and get those metrics in. But that was more in the context of ideation, not in the development process. There are great tools. If you're using Jira for your development process, there are tools out there that will track the life cycle of the dev cycle as opposed to the life cycle of an automation program. So there's two different things. We can take the discussion offline for what those tools are. But they're powerful, but they're looking at something fundamentally different.
Yeah, we are using ServiceNow and it's
So,
for a replacement solution, not Jira, but because we replace Jira with ServiceNow.
so for those of you who didn't quite hear that, they're using ServiceNow for that, and ServiceNow has not hit their expectations. So, unfortunately, we're out of time. I want to thank everybody for sticking with us for this entire time. Really appreciate it. And thank you for coming to Imagine.